What happens when you think you're in control, until the day a process server hands you divorce papers at work? How far can someone push before the person you called the villain becomes the one holding all the cards? My husband's answer was a lawyer, not a second chance. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The candles flickered across the white tablecloth at Romano's Bistro as I adjusted my red dress for the third time. Simon sat across from me, his brown eyes focused on his phone screen instead of appreciating how good I looked tonight. At 34, I still turned heads, and I wasn't about to let my husband's boring routine make me invisible. "Put that away," I said, reaching across to touch his hand. "It's your birthday dinner." Simon glanced up, his sandy hair slightly messy from running his fingers through it all day. "Sorry, work emergency. The servers went down again." "There's always a work emergency with you." I pulled my hand back and took a sip of wine. "Can't you just enjoy one night without thinking about computers?" Before Simon could respond, I spotted Kellen walking through the restaurant entrance. My heart skipped a beat. I'd invited him as a surprise, knowing Simon hadn't seen his old college friend in months. But seeing Kellen's confident stride and that charming smile reminded me why I'd been thinking about him so much lately. "Kellen!" I waved him over, standing to give him a hug that lasted just a moment too long. His cologne was intoxicating, nothing like Simon's practical aftershave. "Ivanthy, you look absolutely stunning," Kellen said, his hand lingering on my waist as he pulled back. "Red is definitely your color." Simon stood awkwardly, extending his hand for a shake. "Hey man, thanks for coming." "Wouldn't miss it," Kellen replied, but his eyes were still on me. "Though I have to say, your wife gets more beautiful every time I see her." I felt my cheeks flush with pleasure. When was the last time Simon had complimented me like that? I couldn't remember. As we settled into our seats, I made sure to sit next to Kellen, leaving Simon across from us. The waiter brought another wine glass, and Kellen immediately took over pouring, his hand brushing mine as he filled my glass. "So, Ivanthy tells me you're doing well at the marketing firm," Simon said, clearly trying to steer the conversation away from me. "Can't complain, though I have to admit, the best part of my day is usually our coffee breaks," Kellen said, winking at me. "Your wife brightens up the whole office building." "Coffee breaks?" Simon's voice had an edge I rarely heard. I laughed, waving my hand dismissively. "Oh, we just bump into each other sometimes. Kellen works 2 blocks from my building. It's not like we plan it or anything. But we did plan it, almost every Tuesday and Thursday for the past month. And those coffee breaks had been lasting longer and longer, filled with conversations about everything Simon and I never talked about anymore. Dreams, adventures, passion." "Right," Kellen agreed, but his smile suggested otherwise. "Pure coincidence." Throughout dinner, I found myself leaning closer to Kellen, laughing louder at his jokes, letting my hand rest on his arm when he told stories. The wine made everything feel warm and exciting. This was what I'd been missing: attention, appreciation, the thrill of being desired. Simon grew quieter as the evening progressed. I noticed him watching us, his jaw tight, but I dismissed it. He was just being his usual paranoid self. There was nothing wrong with enjoying good company and feeling attractive for once. When Kellen excused himself to use the restroom, Simon leaned forward. "What's going on, Ivanthy?" "What do you mean?" I kept my voice light, innocent. "You're all over him. People are staring." I looked around the restaurant. A few nearby tables had indeed been glancing our way, but I chose to interpret their looks as admiration rather than disapproval. "You're being ridiculous. Kellen is your friend, and I'm just being friendly. Maybe if you paid me half the attention he does, you wouldn't feel so threatened." "Threatened?" Simon's voice rose slightly. "I'm not threatened. I'm embarrassed. You're my wife and you're acting like—" "Like what?" I challenged, my own voice getting louder. like a woman who enjoys feeling appreciated, like someone who wants to have actual conversations instead of listening to you complain about server maintenance all night. Simon fell silent, his face flushed. Other diners were definitely looking now, but I didn't care. Let them see that I wasn't some boring housewife who'd given up on life. Kellen returned to the table, immediately sensing the tension. "Everything okay here?" "Perfect," I said brightly, placing my hand on his arm again. Simon was just telling me how much he's enjoyed tonight. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence from Simon's side, while Kellen and I continued our animated conversation. When the check came, Simon paid without a word, his movements sharp and controlled. "This was wonderful," I said as we prepared to leave. "We should do it again soon." "Absolutely," Kellen agreed, giving me another lingering hug. "Happy birthday, Simon. Thanks for sharing your special night." Simon nodded curtly and headed for the car, without waiting for us to finish our goodbye. During the drive home, the silence was deafening. I stared out the window, replaying the evening's highlights, Kellen's compliments, his attention, the way he made me feel alive again. Simon was overreacting, as usual. There was nothing wrong with having a good time. "Daddy, why aren't you and Mommy talking?" Laya's small voice came from the back seat. We'd picked her up from Simon's parents' house after dinner. "We're just tired, sweetheart," I said, turning to smile at our 7-year-old daughter. Her dark eyes, so much like Simon's, looked worried. "Are you mad at each other?" Simon's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Everything's fine, Laya." But everything wasn't fine, and we all knew it. When we got home, Simon went straight to his home office without saying goodnight. I heard him on the phone with his mother, speaking in low tones. Probably complaining about me, making me out to be the villain for simply enjoying myself. I put Laya to bed and went to our bedroom, expecting Simon to join me eventually. But an hour later, I found him settling onto the living room couch with a pillow and blanket. "Really? You're going to sleep out here?" He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't just annoyance or resignation. It was hurt. Deep, genuine hurt. "I think it's best tonight," he said quietly. "This is ridiculous, Simon. You're punishing me for having a good time at your own birthday dinner." "I'm not punishing anyone. I just need some space to think." "Think about what? How to make me feel even more trapped in this marriage?" Simon didn't respond. He turned off the lamp and lay down, his back to me. I stood there for several minutes waiting for him to change his mind, to apologize for overreacting, but he remained still and silent. Finally, I returned to our empty bedroom, more convinced than ever that I deserved better than this. As I lay in bed, I replayed Kellen's compliments, his warm smile, the way he really listened when I talked. This was what I'd been missing. This was what I needed. And if Simon couldn't see that, maybe it was time to find someone who could. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Simon making breakfast downstairs. For a moment, I hoped last night's drama had blown over, that he'd realized how silly he'd been. But when I entered the kitchen, his greeting was polite and distant. "Morning," he said, without looking up from Laya's lunch preparation. "Good morning." I poured myself coffee, studying his profile. "Did you sleep okay on that uncomfortable couch?" "Fine." Laya sat at the breakfast table, glancing nervously between us. "Are you still mad, Daddy?" "I'm not mad, sweetheart." Simon's voice softened for our daughter. "Sometimes grown-ups just need to work through things." "Work through what?" I asked, keeping my tone light for Laya's sake. "There's nothing to work through. You're making a big deal out of nothing." Simon finally looked at me, and I saw that same hurt expression from last night. "Nothing?" "Exactly. Nothing happened. Kellen is your friend. I was being polite, and you turned it into some kind of drama. Honestly, Simon, your jealousy is getting out of hand." I watched him process this, saw him second-guessing himself. Good. Maybe now he'd realize how ridiculous he'd been. "Maybe you're right," he said slowly. "Maybe I overreacted." "Of course you did." I moved closer, placing a hand on his arm. "I love you. You know that. I would never do anything to hurt our family. The words came easily, automatically, and they weren't entirely untrue. I did love Simon in my way. I just needed more than he could give me. At work that morning, my coworker Dina immediately noticed my mood. "You're glowing today," she said, settling into the cubicle next to mine. "Good night." Actually, yes. We went out for Simon's birthday, and his friend Kellen joined us. It was so nice to have adult conversation for once. "Kellen?" Dina raised an eyebrow. She was 38, twice divorced, and had strong opinions about men and marriage. "The one you've been having coffee with?" "We don't have coffee. We just run into each other sometimes." "Right." Dina's knowing smile irritated me. "And this Kellen, he's single?" "Recently, yes. But that's not—" "Honey, I've been where you are. Married young, settled down, started feeling invisible. There's nothing wrong with enjoying a little attention from an attractive man." "It's not like that," I protested, though my heart raced at her words. "We're just friends." "Of course you are. But friendship can be dangerous when you're not getting what you need at home." I thought about Simon's cold shoulder this morning, his constant work obsessions, the way he'd made me feel guilty for simply enjoying myself. Dina was right. I wasn't getting what I needed at home. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Kellen. "Hope I didn't cause trouble last night. You looked beautiful, as always." I glanced around the office before responding. "No trouble. Simon's just being sensitive. Thanks for making his birthday special." "Any time. Coffee later this week?" I hesitated for only a moment. Tuesday sounds perfect. When I got home that evening, Simon was in his office again, surrounded by notebooks and papers. This was new. Usually his work stayed on the computer. "What are you working on?" I asked from the doorway. He looked up, startled, quickly closing one of the notebooks. "Just organizing some things." "Work stuff?" "Various things." His answer was vague, evasive. "Simon, about last night. I hope you realize nothing inappropriate happened. Kellen is your friend, and I was just being social. I can't help it if other men find me attractive." "I know," he said, but something in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Good, because I refuse to live like a prisoner just because you have trust issues." Over the following days, I noticed Simon watching me more carefully. He asked casual questions about my day, my lunch breaks, my plans. I answered honestly, mostly. There was no need to mention that Kellen and I had started texting regularly, or that our Tuesday coffee date had turned into a 2-hour conversation about our dreams and disappointments. "You seem happier lately," Simon observed one evening as I hummed while doing dishes. "I'm trying to focus on the positive," I replied. "Life's too short to be miserable all the time." "Are you miserable? With us, I mean?" The question caught me off guard. "Of course not. I just think we both need to make more effort. You with your work obsession, me with appreciating what I have." It was a diplomatic answer, but not entirely honest. The truth was, my conversations with Kellen had reminded me of everything I'd given up when I married Simon. Adventure, passion, the excitement of being truly desired by someone who saw me as more than just a wife and mother. Thursday's coffee with Kellen lasted 3 hours. We talked about books, travel, our college dreams versus our current realities. He listened in ways Simon never did, asked questions about my thoughts and feelings, instead of just waiting for his turn to talk about server problems. "You're wasted in that administrative job," he told me, as we walked back toward our respective offices. "You're too smart, too vibrant for filing and answering phones." "Simon says the benefits are good," I replied automatically. "Simon says a lot of things. But what do you say? What do you want?" The question haunted me for the rest of the week. What did I want? I wanted to feel alive again. I wanted someone to see me as Ivanthy the woman, not just Simon's wife or Lia's mother. I wanted excitement, appreciation, passion. When Simon's mother Helen called that Friday, I could hear the suspicion in her voice. "How was Simon's birthday dinner?" He seemed upset when he called. It was lovely, I said carefully. We went to Romano's with his friend Kellen. Ah. The single syllable carried volumes of meaning. Helen had never particularly liked me, always thought her precious son had married beneath him. And how is this Kellen? He's doing well. Recently divorced, actually. It was nice of him to join us. Recently divorced. Helen repeated the words like they tasted bitter. How convenient. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all, dear. I'm sure you were the perfect hostess. After she hung up, I felt a surge of anger. Helen was clearly poisoning Simon against me, making him suspicious of innocent friendships. No wonder he'd been acting strange lately. That evening, I found Simon in his office again, writing in one of his notebooks. What are you always writing in there? I asked. He looked up, and for a moment, I saw something almost calculating in his expression. Just keeping track of things. What kind of things? Dates, times, conversations. My memory isn't what it used to be. Something about his tone made me uncomfortable, but I couldn't put my finger on why. That seems excessive. Maybe, but it helps me process things, especially when I'm confused about situations. What situations? Simon closed the notebook and looked directly at me. Ivanthy, are you having an affair? The question hit like a physical blow. What? No, how can you even ask me that? I'm sorry, I had to ask. No, you didn't. The fact that you would even think that shows how little you trust me. I'm your wife, Simon. I've never given you any reason to doubt me. You're right, I'm sorry. But as I left his office, I noticed he didn't put the notebook away, and I realized with growing unease that Simon might be more observant than I'd given him credit for. Sunday dinner at Helen and Martin's house used to be something I looked forward to. Now, walking up their front steps with Simon and Laia, I felt like I was entering enemy territory. Helen's suspicious phone call still echoed in my mind, and I could see the judgment in her pale blue eyes before we even sat down. Ivanthy, you look tired, Helen said by way of greeting, though I'd spent extra time on my makeup and chosen my best Sunday dress. I feel great, actually, I replied with a bright smile. Work's been busy, but I'm handling it well. Martin, Simon's father, gave me a warmer welcome, but I noticed even he seemed more reserved than usual. They'd clearly been talking. During dinner, the conversation felt stilted and careful. Laia chatted about school, filling some of the awkward silence, but I could feel Helen watching my every move, analyzing every word. Simon tells me you've been reconnecting with old friends, Helen said as she served dessert. Not really. We just had dinner with Kellen for Simon's birthday. It was nice to catch up. Kellen Drake? From college? Martin looked interested. How's he doing? Very well. He's working in marketing now, recently divorced. I kept my voice casual, but I saw Helen's expression tighten at the word divorced. How recently? Helen asked. I'm not sure exactly. A few months, I think. And you've been seeing him regularly? The question was direct, almost accusatory. Simon looked up from his pie, suddenly alert. We run into each other occasionally for coffee. His office is near mine. How occasionally? I felt my cheeks flush with anger. I don't keep a detailed log, Helen. We're adults having casual conversations. There's nothing inappropriate about it. Of course not, Helen said, but her tone suggested otherwise. I'm sure you're very careful about appearances. What's that supposed to mean? Simon cleared his throat. Mom, maybe we should... No, I want to know what she means, I interrupted, my voice rising. If you have something to say, Helen, just say it. Helen set down her fork and looked directly at me. I'm saying that married women should be careful about spending time alone with recently divorced men, especially when their husbands are uncomfortable with it. Simon isn't uncomfortable. Are you, Simon? All eyes turned to my husband. I watched him struggle with his answer, clearly torn between loyalty to me and honesty about his feelings. I was a little concerned after the dinner, he admitted quietly. Concerned about what? That I had a conversation with another human being? That someone besides you found me interesting? Ivanthy. No, this is ridiculous. You're all acting like I've committed some crime. I had coffee with a friend. I was polite at dinner. If that threatens you, maybe the problem isn't with me. Laya had stopped eating, her dark eyes wide with confusion and fear. Why is everyone yelling? We're not yelling, sweetheart, I said, forcing my voice to soften. We're just having a discussion. It sounds like yelling, she whispered, moving closer to Simon. I noticed the movement and felt a stab of hurt. Even my own daughter was choosing sides against me. Maybe we should go, Simon said, putting his arm around Leia. Yes, maybe we should. I stood up abruptly. Thank you for dinner, Helen, and thank you for making it clear where you stand. Ivanthy, I'm not trying to... Yes, you are. You're trying to turn my husband against me based on nothing but your own suspicious mind. The drive home was silent except for Laya's quiet sniffling in the back seat. I stared out the window, replaying the confrontation and feeling more justified in my anger with each mile. They were ganging up on me, making me the villain for simply having a life outside my marriage. That night, after Leia was in bed, Simon and I finally talked. My mother wasn't trying to attack you, he said carefully. Wasn't she? It sure felt like an interrogation. She's just concerned. We both are. Concerned about what? I've done nothing wrong. Then why do I feel like you're pulling away from me? The question was quiet, vulnerable, and it caught me off guard. For a moment, I saw past my own defensiveness to the hurt in his eyes. I'm not pulling away. I'm just trying to have some independence, some adult friendships. Is that so wrong? No, but the way you are with Kellen, it doesn't feel like just friendship. That's your insecurity talking, not reality. Maybe. But can you understand why I'm worried? I could, actually. If Simon was spending time with an attractive, recently divorced woman, texting her regularly, lighting up when her name was mentioned, I'd be concerned too. But admitting that would mean acknowledging that my behavior might be inappropriate, and I wasn't ready to do that. I understand that you don't trust me, I said instead, and that hurts more than you know. I want to trust you. Help me understand what's happening. This was my chance to be honest, to explain my feelings of neglect and loneliness, to work together on our marriage. Instead, I chose the path that protected my secret connection with Kellen. Nothing is happening. You're imagining problems that don't exist. Simon studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. If you say nothing's happening, I believe you. But something in his tone suggested he didn't believe me at all. Later that night, as Simon slept beside me, my phone buzzed with a text from Kellen. Hope you had a good day. Thinking of you. I smiled in the darkness, typing back. It was challenging, but better now. Thanks for thinking of me. Always. You deserve so much better than what you're getting. The message sent a warm thrill through me. Someone understood. Someone saw my worth. I deleted the conversation before putting my phone away, a habit I'd developed over the past few weeks. Simon might check my messages, and there was no need to give him ammunition for his paranoid theories. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about Helen's accusations and Simon's hurt expression. They didn't understand what I needed, what I was missing. They wanted me to be satisfied with a life that felt increasingly empty and routine. But Kellen understood. Kellen saw me as a woman with dreams and desires beyond laundry and grocery shopping. With him, I felt alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. If that was wrong, I didn't want to be right. Tuesday morning arrived grey and drizzly, matching my mood after another tense breakfast with Simon. He'd been asking more questions lately, casual inquiries about my schedule, my lunch plans, who I'd talk to at work. I answered truthfully when I could, vaguely when I couldn't. I might be late tonight, he said as he gathered his laptop bag. The new security protocols are giving everyone problems. Of course they are, I replied, not looking up from my coffee. When are they not? Ivanthy, I know work has been demanding lately. Maybe this weekend we could… Maybe. I cut him off, still irritated by Sunday's family dinner. We'll see. After he left, I felt the familiar guilt-anger cycle that had become my daily routine. Guilt for being short with him, anger that he was making me feel guilty for having needs he couldn't meet. At work, Dina immediately picked up on my mood. Trouble in paradise? Simon's family thinks I'm having an affair, I said, settling into my desk chair with more force than necessary. Are you? The direct question startled me. What? No. Okay, but you have been glowing lately, and you mention this Kellen guy a lot. We're friends, that's all. Friends who text regularly. I stared at her. How did you… Honey, I've been watching you smile at your phone for weeks. And yesterday you were typing something during the staff meeting that definitely wasn't work-related. Heat flooded my cheeks. It's not what you think. What I think is that you're a woman who's been taken for granted for years, and now someone is giving you the attention you deserve. There's nothing wrong with that. Even if I'm married. Especially because you're married. Marriage isn't a prison sentence. You're allowed to have friends, to feel attractive, to enjoy yourself. Her words echoed my own thoughts, validating feelings I'd been struggling with for months. Maybe I wasn't the villain everyone was making me out to be. Around 11, my phone buzzed. Coffee today? I have something exciting to tell you. I glanced around the office, then typed back, yes, but let's try somewhere new. Romano's Cafe on 5th? Perfect. Noon. See you there. I deleted the conversation and spent the rest of the morning anticipating our meeting. What did he have to tell me? Something about work, probably, but the way he'd phrased it suggested something more personal. Romano's Cafe was busier than our usual spot, which felt safer somehow. I found a corner table and ordered a latte, checking my reflection in my phone camera while I waited. I'd chosen a blue sweater that brought out my eyes and had touched up my lipstick twice. Kellen arrived 10 minutes late, apologizing profusely as he slid into the seat across from me. Sorry, client call ran long. You look incredible, by the way. Thank you. The compliment sent its usual warm thrill through me. So, what's your exciting news? I got the promotion. Senior account manager, 20% raise, corner office. Kellen, that's wonderful. I reached across to squeeze his hand, letting my fingers linger longer than necessary. You deserve it. Thanks. I couldn't wait to tell you. You're the first person I've told, actually. Not even your family. My family doesn't really understand my work, but you do. You get excited about my successes. The implication hung between us, that I understood him in ways others didn't, that our connection was special. I felt that familiar flutter in my stomach, the one that had been growing stronger with each meeting. We should celebrate, I said impulsively. I was hoping you'd say that. There's this new wine bar downtown. Very quiet, very intimate. We could go after work sometime. I'd like that. The words were out before I could stop them. Friday? I thought quickly. Simon usually worked late on Fridays, and I could tell him I was having drinks with Dina. Friday sounds perfect. We spent the next 2 hours talking about his new position, my frustrations with my dead-end job, our shared love of travel and adventure. Kellen had stories of business trips to exciting cities, while I had stories of family vacations to predictable beach towns. You should travel more, he said as we prepared to leave. See the world, experience things. Hard to do with a family and a husband who thinks adventure means trying a new restaurant. Maybe you need to make your own adventures. The suggestion lingered in my mind as we walked back toward our respective offices. At the corner where we usually parted ways, Kellen surprised me by pulling me into a hug that lasted several seconds longer than friendship required. I'm really glad we've reconnected, he murmured near my ear. You bring something special to my life. You too, I whispered back, inhaling his cologne and feeling dizzy with the closeness. When we finally separated, I saw something in his eyes that made my heart race. This was definitely more than friendship, and we both knew it. The rest of the week passed in a haze of anticipation. I found myself checking my appearance constantly, buying new lipstick, paying more attention to my outfits. At home, I was distracted and irritable, snapping at Simon over minor things and feeling guilty about it afterward. "Are you feeling okay?" he asked Thursday night. "You seem stressed." "I'm fine, just tired." "Maybe you should see Dr. Martinez. You haven't had a checkup in a while." "I don't need a doctor, Simon. I need less stress and more understanding." Friday morning, I told Simon about my fictional plans with Dina. "Girls' night sounds good," he said, though something in his expression seemed off. "Where are you going?" "Just drinks somewhere downtown, nothing fancy." "What time will you be home?" "Not too late, probably around 10. He nodded, but I caught him watching me with that same calculating look I'd noticed lately. It made me uncomfortable, but I pushed the feeling aside. I deserved this evening. I deserved to feel appreciated and desired. The wine bar was everything Kellen had promised, dimly lit, intimate, with cozy booths that encouraged close conversation. He'd arrived first and chosen a corner table, standing to greet me with another lingering hug. "You look stunning," he said, his hands resting on my waist. "That dress is perfect on you." I'd chosen carefully, a black dress that was elegant but showed just enough to be interesting. Simon barely noticed when I left the house, but Kellen's appreciation made me feel beautiful and feminine. The evening flew by in a blur of wine, laughter, and increasingly intimate conversation. Kellen told me about his divorce, how his ex-wife had never understood his ambitions. I found myself sharing frustrations about Simon that I'd never voiced before. "He's a good man," I said, though the wine was making me more honest than I intended. "But he's so predictable, safe. Sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing." "You're not disappearing. You're just buried under other people's expectations." Kellen's hand covered mine on the table. "You deserve to shine." "Do I?" "Absolutely. You're intelligent, beautiful, passionate. Any man would be lucky to have your attention." The compliment went straight to my head, mixing with the wine to create a dangerous combination of desire and recklessness. When Kellen suggested we continue the conversation at his apartment, I knew I should say no. I knew I should go home to my husband and daughter. Instead, I said yes. Kellen's apartment was exactly what I'd expected: modern, masculine, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He opened another bottle of wine while I stood at those windows, watching the lights blur together like stars. "Beautiful view," I said when he joined me with 2 glasses. "Not as beautiful as you." The line was cheesy, something from a movie, but in my wine-softened state, it felt romantic. When he moved closer, I didn't step away. When his hand touched my face, I leaned into it. "Ivanthy," he said softly, "I've been thinking about this moment for weeks." "We shouldn't," I whispered, but I didn't move away. "Why not? You deserve to be appreciated, to be desired." When he kissed me, I kissed him back. For those few minutes, I felt alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. This was what I'd been missing: passion, excitement, the intoxicating feeling of being wanted. But when his hand started moving lower, reality crashed back in. I pulled away, my heart pounding with more than just desire. "I can't. I'm sorry, but I can't." "It's okay," he said, though disappointment flickered across his face. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for." "I should go home." "Of course, let me call you a cab." The ride home gave me time to think, to process what had almost happened. I'd crossed a line tonight, but I hadn't crossed the ultimate line. A kiss wasn't the same as an affair. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness brought on by wine and loneliness. I could live with a kiss. Simon was asleep when I got home, or pretending to be. I slipped into bed quietly, my head spinning from wine and guilt and the lingering taste of Kellen's lips. Saturday morning brought a hangover and harsh daylight that made everything seem sordid and wrong. Simon was up early, making pancakes for Laya, his movements careful and controlled. "How was your evening with Dina?" he asked without looking at me. "Fine. We just talked, had a few drinks." "Where did you go?" "That new place downtown. Very crowded, too loud, really." Simon nodded, flipping pancakes with mechanical precision. Something about his calm demeanor made me nervous. Over the next few days, I tried to return to normal. I texted Kellen to thank him for the evening, but suggested we take a break from our coffee meetings. He responded with understanding, saying he'd wait until I was ready. But Simon's behavior grew increasingly strange. He asked detailed questions about my schedule, my co-workers, my lunch plans. When I mentioned needing to reschedule a dentist appointment, he offered to call for me. "I can handle my own appointments," I snapped. "Of course, I was just trying to help." Wednesday evening, I was folding laundry when Simon appeared in the bedroom doorway with his notebook and several printed papers. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. "About what?" "About where you really were Friday night." "I told you I was with Dina." "No, you weren't." He sat on the bed, spreading papers between us. "I called Dina Saturday morning. She was surprised to hear about your girls' night since she spent Friday evening at her sister's birthday party." The blood drained from my face. "You called Dina? You checked up on me?" "I did, and I found out some interesting things." He opened his notebook, and I saw pages of handwritten notes, dates, times, observations. My hand started shaking. Monday, October 15th, came home 20 minutes late, claimed traffic. Tuesday, October 16th, phone face down during dinner, smiled while texting. Wednesday, October 17th, new perfume, said it was a free sample. "Simon, what is this?" "This is me paying attention, something I should have done weeks ago." He pulled out printed phone records, and my heart stopped. Every call, every text, laid out in black and white. 47 text messages to Kellen Drake in the past 2 weeks. Phone calls lasting up to an hour. And this, he pointed to a highlighted entry, a 3-hour gap last Friday when your phone was in the downtown area, not at the restaurant you claimed to visit. "How did you get these?" "I'm the primary account holder. I have access to all the records." I stared at the evidence, my mind racing for explanations, excuses, anything that could explain away what looked damning but wasn't quite what it seemed. "This doesn't prove anything inappropriate," I said finally. "Doesn't it? Let's see what else I found." He pulled out printed photos from social media, enhanced and enlarged. The birthday dinner at Romano's, but these weren't the casual shots I remembered. In these photos, I could see Kellen's hand on my thigh, my body language clearly inviting his attention. These were posted by other diners who were at the restaurant that night. Amazing what people share online these days. "Simon, I'm not finished." His voice remained calm, controlled, but I could see rage simmering beneath the surface. "I hired a private investigator, very discreet, very thorough." He laid out more photos, me entering Kellen's apartment building Friday night, leaving 2 hours later. The timestamps were clearly visible. "Still want to tell me you were with Dina?" I stared at the evidence, knowing I was caught but still not ready to admit the full truth. "Okay, yes, I was with Kellen Friday night, but nothing happened." "Nothing?" "We talked. We had drinks. That's all." "In his apartment?" "We went there to talk privately, but nothing physical happened." It wasn't entirely a lie. We'd kissed, but we hadn't slept together. In my mind, that was still something. Simon studied my face, then pulled out his phone. "I recorded our conversation Sunday night, the one where I asked directly if you were having an affair and you said no." My mouth went dry. "You recorded me." "I recorded us, both of us. It's legal in this state as long as one party consents." He played a few seconds of audio. my voice clearly denying any inappropriate relationship. I also have recordings of your phone calls with your sister Lauren, where you discussed your feelings for Kellen and complained about our marriage. I felt the walls closing in around me. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself and my daughter. There's a difference. Simon, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been lying to me for months. How you've been meeting another man behind my back. How you've been planning to leave me. I never said I was leaving you. Didn't you? Let me play that conversation with Lauren again. Stop. I held up my hands, tears starting to flow. Just stop. Simon closed the notebook and gathered his papers. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow morning, you'll be served with divorce papers and a temporary restraining order. A restraining order? Simon, you're being ridiculous. I'm being careful. The order prevents you from taking Laya out of state and requires supervised visitation until we can sort out custody. You can't take my daughter away from me. I'm not taking her away. I'm protecting her from the chaos you've created. He stood up, looking down at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, determined, final. Simon, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. No, we can't. You made your choice when you decided to pursue another man instead of working on our marriage. Now you get to live with the consequences. He walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Ivanthy. You might want to call Kellen. The investigator paid him a visit today. Apparently, he's very eager to cooperate with the divorce proceedings. Something about not wanting any trouble at his new job. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that sounded like a gavel falling. I sat on our bed, surrounded by the evidence of my deception, finally understanding that Simon hadn't been paranoid or controlling. He'd been methodical. While I'd been playing games and justifying my behavior, he'd been building a case. And now I was going to lose everything. Monday morning, a process server handed me a thick envelope in front of the whole office. Inside, divorce petition, emergency custody, asset freeze. Simon wasn't bluffing. He'd documented everything. My lawyer, David, said we could fight on no physical adultery, emotional neglect, and Simon's surveillance, but every new disclosure showed how thoroughly Simon, the IT guy I'd dismissed as boring, had built his case. In court, Patricia, his attorney, dissected my life, late-night visits to Kellen's apartment, hidden dinners, deleted texts, receipts, camera footage. I clung to the line that nothing physical happened until she played Kellen's recording, my drunk voice confessing attraction, kissing sounds, everything I'd sworn under oath didn't exist. In a few minutes, I'd gone from hurt wife in a rough patch to spouse who lies to the court. The judge handed Simon primary custody, the house, the savings, even my car. I got supervised visits, a no-contact order with Kellen, mandatory counseling, and child support plus legal fees. Outside the courthouse, I begged Simon to reconsider. He told me I'd chosen fantasy over family, lies over truth, and that love required the sacrifice and honesty I'd never shown. When Laya shrank behind him instead of running to me, I understood what I'd really lost. 6 months later, in a tiny studio, reading a report that still called for supervised visits, with my friends gone and Kellen in another state, the irony was brutal. I'd sworn I needed a real man to give me what I deserved. Turns out I got one. He just came armed with evidence and a very good lawyer, and that was exactly what I'd earned.